is Allegra Bermudez. I work at Vetri Community Partnership, which is based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The program that I work in is E360, and I'm one of 6 program coordinators. What I do is I'm assigned 3 schools in Philadelphia. They're charter schools in West Philly. Am I allowed to say the names, or does it matter?
Yeah, you can say them.
Okay, so I have 2 charter schools. One is Harity, the other one is Independence Charter School West, and then the last one is an Episcopalian school called St. James.
Okay.
And at all those schools, I teach 3 lessons a year, and we teach kids how to increase their cooking abilities, educate them about nutrition. Yeah.
Okay, so before we go a little bit more into what your programs do, would you be able to kind of describe what Vetri is in general and as a whole what the organization looks to do?
Yeah, so Vetri was founded by Mark Vetri, who is a restaurateur in Philadelphia. He owns a few big name restaurants in Philly. He wanted to give back to the community, so he started this nonprofit. First, it was called Vetri Foundation, but then they rebranded and called it Vetri Community Partnership. We started off with Eat a Kit, which is now what I do, the E360 program. It started out in the lunchroom, but then we slowly realized that it would be more supplemental if we brought nutrition education into the classrooms.
Okay. You can look at me, you don't have to look at
Okay.
me. So as far as what your position does, what kind of daily activities do you do when you do it in the schools?
In the schools itself, I'm either, if I'm not at my own school that I'm assigned to, I'm helping assist other program coordinators. So we do a little bit of a lesson. So, for example, the lesson we're teaching now is eating whole foods versus juice. So we teach them about why it's important and what nutrients are found in whole foods versus in juice. Aside from in the classroom, with the actual lesson portion, we do actual hands-on cooking, not just demonstrations, but we get the kids involved too, so they get to learn how to use safety knives, graters, peelers. It's a lot more different learning from demonstration versus actually be able to do it, because if I were just watching basketball, it wouldn't help me become a better basketball player, so that's one thing we try to teach the students.
Okay, so how do you kind of fit your curriculum into what their normal curriculum is at the schools?
Like their health curriculum or just in general, like school wellness?
Both, I guess.
So in my program, the things we do, it's not necessarily integrating it with the school curriculum. We have our own. E360 in particular, we're funded by the government. So that's the USDA, and they give us the funds in order to do these things, so we have to stick to their curriculum, not necessarily the schools. But when we do partner with the schools, we try to focus on what wellness outside of food is. So we do different things like movement breaks. We help out with like school gardens. It just depends upon what the school wants from us.
Okay, so what would you say is an area that the education system is currently lacking as far as teaching nutrition and healthy eating habits?
One thing that pops in my head, not necessarily the curriculum, but it's breakfast in school. In Philadelphia School District, they don't necessarily have like a guideline or protocol for how many sugars should be in one meal versus how many carbohydrates should be in one. That's why we have a really high obesity rate here in Philadelphia, because we don't have that kind of guideline set for breakfast.
Okay, so kind of more in general across the city or inner cities in general, how much is a lack of healthy food options and food accessibility an issue for especially young kids?
It's really hard in Philly. I don't work in these schools in North Philadelphia, but North Philadelphia is considered a food desert. They don't have grocery stores within like a mile or 2 radius. So we're trying to partner with different organizations in Philly, like Philabundance, Hungry Harvest, to bring produce stands to all those schools in North Philadelphia, just because it's really hard. We're trying to partner with different organizations like Philabundance and Hungry Harvest. They're all Philly-based, trying to bring produce stands to those areas versus bringing them out to West Philadelphia where I am, just because they have, stores within the mile or 2 radius. So it can be really hard, especially if they don't know what they're looking to buy. So aside from in classroom, we do like adult education, and so like we're teaching everyone how to make a proper grocery list and where to find these needs, because it can be really hard. Somebody can be very nervous about like, oh, I don't know where to shop, or like, where can I find this specific product?
Mm-hmm. So I guess you can touch on it a little bit for adults and kids, but when you work in these classrooms, what is one of the most surprising things that you see that they lack the knowledge of?
So one instance actually pops in my head. Whenever I cook, I always tell my students to eat the foods raw. They don't really realize that you can eat uncooked carrots, you can eat raw lettuce. They don't really understand that, so that's why I give them the opportunity to explore, another taste. One thing, we have 3 rules in the classroom. I feel like that's really important to highlight. The first rule is that we all cook together, so we all have to wait until everybody's served, because that's just manners. The second rule is that everyone's responsible for their first bite, just because this could be a unique experience for everybody. We all worked really hard together, so we're all going to try it together. And then the last rule is that once you've given the bite, you have taken the bite, you vote on whether you liked it or not. So we do like a thumbs up, middle down system.
Okay.
Something really easy for the kids to do.
How about adults when you teach the adult classes?
Well, we obviously don't do the thumbs up, middle, and down. They're a lot more receptive of these things because they're aware that like nutrition is really important, and they want to give that to their kids. So it's really nice being able to partner with the schools, the parents, all the stakeholders.
Okay. Where do you see these kind of issues popping up as far as them not knowing, how to cook with basic vegetables, fruits and vegetables, or, not knowing how to best eat, touch on all the parts of the food pyramid in their diet?
Can you condense that a little bit? That's a long question.
Where do you think these problems stem from, that they don't know how to have a diverse, proper, healthy food?
I think it's an array of different answers. There's not just one single thing like, oh, this is why no one's getting enough nutrition. Schools definitely have a big say in that, especially the school district schools, because they're the ones that have the limited guidelines to things, or don't even have any guidelines. Versus charter schools, they'll have a little bit more leeway because they make their own rules most of the time. Another is parent involvement, like I touched upon with the adults. You kind of have to practice what you preach. So if your parent is telling you to eat more vegetables, but they're not doing it, you're not going to do that. It's kind of like monkey see, monkey do.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, obviously you mentioned food deserts, that's a big issue too? Could you, elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I don't know how long it's been that Vetri has been an organization. I want to say 10 or so years, but there are definitely a lot of organizations before us that have been trying to deal with these issues. I mentioned before, like Phil Abundance, Hungry Harvest, but also universities and things like that. I don't know. It's a hard issue to tackle if, like, the Department of Public Health in Philadelphia, that isn't their main goal. So what we try to do to help them is by partnering all of us together to get to that one purpose. That's why you see a bunch of different organizations in one school.
Mm-hmm. Do you see an area where some of these organizations are lacking, where you hope there could be some more programs?
I would love to see more programs, but I think it's a matter of what that organization wants to do. It's not all kumbaya here in Philadelphia. Everyone has their own vision and what they want to do with their own organization. So there are different ideas to, definitely tackle food deserts and getting the nutrition education out there to everyone. But I don't know. It just depends on what organization, what their goals are.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think schools could specifically combat this, with free and reduced lunches, or healthier breakfasts for kids that can't get that at home, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, what I do, I think, is really helpful. As a nonprofit, I think it's really important that we're putting our time and effort out there to help these kids. So it just takes individuals who really want to make a change in the world with food access and nutrition education. Just having those people around versus, I don't know, people who are just giving out free items like donations, but not really making that key relationship with the school. Those are two totally different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the connection means a lot between not just telling them what to do, but showing them how to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Like in my schools, I'm probably friends with like the janitor, the administration, the staff, the school bus people. Like it takes a lot of people to try to tackle food access,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure other things too.
Yeah. So obviously you're not involved in the administration side of it, but how could you see, like you said, the Department of Public Health, they're not really focusing on this kind of stuff. How could you see city governments and, like the Philly Department of Public Health look to address some of these issues internally?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not saying they're not doing those things. They're not trying to make strides towards it. I think it could just be a bigger presence. There are a lot more school district schools that don't have, when I talk about like the breakfast, stuff like that, they don't have the guidelines or protocol for what is like a healthy breakfast. Like, I don't know, I kind of feel like most of the time they look at the dollar cost of it and how much it is per kid versus what's nutritionally right for the students. Or even the time of day too. A lot of the students are able to bring their food into the classrooms because, there are factors of why students aren't eating. Maybe it's because their parents are rushing to work. Maybe it's because they're not allowed to have food in the classroom. It just depends.
You could see probably some lot more after school programs too that would help with kids not necessarily being able to go home and rely on getting a meal at their table every night.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the schools in Philadelphia have after school care up until like 5, 6 in the evening, just because of parents working or grandparents are getting their kids. The schools I've worked in, they do have after school like snacks and things like that, but they're not necessarily the healthiest ones. For instance, one of my schools does pretzel day on Fridays, and they sell them to the kids for $1, but that's not necessarily the healthiest snack because there's sodium in that, versus if they have like a whole grain pretzel, that might be a little bit more better for the students.
I lost my train of thought. So how do you think, you mentioned after school programs too. Mm-hmm. What do you think as far as those or the ones that you run or you've seen by other organizations? What do students respond to the best?
Well, in my organization, we do a lot of evaluation with like neophobia, whether like kids want to try food or things that they haven't tried before. A lot of the younger students gravitate towards fruits. I think it's just because they're naturally sweet versus vegetables. I think something to keep in mind though is that those things are perishable. So it can be really hard to bring into schools and find the correct refrigeration for them or like storage for them. So no rodents get into it, no like contamination comes into play with that. That's why a lot of the snacks in the schools are prepackaged.
Okay. And just kind of to finally wrap things up here, what could you see, obviously this is speculation, but what could you see or what would you hope to see from Vetri or other organizations going forward to address other issues in the future?
Mm-hmm. My program in particular, I think sticking to the curriculum we have now is really important because it gives sort of a repetition for the students. Just like any student, when they go into a different grade, they remember things from years prior. So I think just implementing or like ingraining that into their minds is really important.
So, to have a program set up from elementary to middle and even into high school?
Yeah, especially with the high schoolers. We have one high school where they have like 100% college acceptance rate, which is great. But then that's when you start to get a lot of independence. And, kids don't really know how to cook things, so they're eating ramen or Cheetos in their dorms. So I think it's really important, especially in high school, if they're willing to pursue higher education. This is one part of education they should know is their own nutrition.